And I also think that sure, Mike Waltz should be accountable for this. And Mike Waltz was on Fox last night. This is crazy, Piers. Mike Waltz was on Fox last night suggesting to Laura Ingraham that Jeffrey Goldberg might have gotten on this Signal chat deliberately. That's what he said. He said it might have been deliberate. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. That's our national security advisor. Like, that's a very serious accusation. He's saying that a magazine editor might have committed illegal espionage.
Tim Miller was a guest on Piers Morgan show, Piers Morgan Uncensored, to go up against a panel that included MAGA right-winger Dave Rubin, Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss, and walkaway campaign founder Brandon Stracka. We're going to take a look at clips from Piers Morgan show, and in this segment, they talk about the Signal security breach scandal. So we're going to take a look at clips from this. I will share my thoughts on this too. Let's check it out together.
I don't care which side is doing it. But anyone that tries to defend this or downplay the severity of it or play whataboutery or anything else, I think it needs to stop. This needs to be accepted for what it was. A tremendous error which could have had tremendously serious consequences. And if it was a senior military person who'd done it, they'd already be gone.
For sure. Look, to that senior military example, look, Pete Hegseth has already fired several generals. He's fired several people throughout the Department of Defense. So is Elon Musk as part of the DOGE process. Imagine, we're doing the hypotheticals. What about Biden? I think the more apt hypothetical is imagine if, a low-level general who was involved in this operation had texted the exact time and location of a military strike to an anti-Trump journalist. Now, and imagine if that general is one of these woke generals that they're going after. Maybe it's a black general or a woman. Imagine what Pete Hegseth would be saying today. Imagine what Dave Rubin would be saying today. We know what these guys would be saying. These woke generals, they're the deep state. We need a court martial. We need an investigation. This person needs to be fired. I think we can all agree that that is what would be happening today. That person, if they were a two-star black general or female general and they had done this, they would be fired today. I think that's very obvious. And so, look, Pete Hegseth might be a mate of yours, might be a good person. I don't know. I've never met Pete Hegseth. But to me, you read this Signal chain, and this looks like it got its way in over his head. And this is not, if General Mattis here, it's impossible to imagine General Mattis texting emojis and all caps pathetic to like a Signal group chain, preparing them for when the strikes would be. It's just, it signals to me somebody that's not serious. It's not up for the job. The fact that then on the chain, he says, we have 100% operational security here. And there's someone on the chain he doesn't know. Like you didn't check to make sure you knew everybody on the chain. I think it shows just an unbelievable lack of seriousness. And I think clearly if this was one of the woke generals that Pete Hegseth doesn't like, they would be fired today and there would be a DOJ investigation targeting them.
All right, Dave Rubin, a lot to unpack there, but a lot I agree with, I have to say. Look, let's talk about the Signal aspect. If they, as you say, and I've seen that report, if they were encouraged to use Signal, and in fact it had been put on a lot apparently of their phones and so on when they came into their positions, so they're allowed to use Signal, which is deemed to be one of the more secure ways of communicating. And you believe, as Pete Hegseth clearly did, that you've only got on there the Secretary of State, the Defense Secretary, the National Security Advisor, and so on. In other words, all the senior members of the cabinet that would be involved, plus one or two hand-picked staffers who are at a very high level. If you assume that's who you're talking to privately, then I'm not too fazed about emojis and stuff like that. You've got to have some presumption, I think, when you're conversing with people at that level, that you presume to be that level, that it will remain private. So I'm not sure I can get too exercised about that part of it. The thing that still exercises me, though, is just that if it hadn't been Jeffrey Goldberg, but had been somebody who wanted to really damage the administration, they really could have done, and you could have seen American planes blown out the sky.
Sure. Look, there's a couple of things going on here. First off, I think your guest in the center, I'm sorry, I don't remember the congressman's name. I think he said it was illegal to use Signal in these chats. Now, again, Ratcliffe, who is the CIA director, is saying, as you just said again, that it was preloaded on their computers and devices. So I don't think that's illegal, but if there's some legal portion of this,
Well, just for the record, it's
You are not
Jake,
allowed
it's
to
Jake,
share
it's Jake
classified material
Auchincloss.
over Signal.
Well, just to introduce you again, Jake, for Dave, it's Jake Auchincloss, who's a Democrat congressman from Massachusetts. So, Jake, you want to respond to him?
Okay, so well, there's some issue as it pertains
illegal.
to whether
You
Signal
cannot
should
share
or shouldn't have
classified
been
material
used. We
over
can all
Signal.
accept that.
Okay, so that's interesting. So, all right, so Congressman, just to be clear, it is illegal to share classified information over Signal. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the military has its own entire network. They have SCIFs inside the homes of every senior military commander. They have SCIFs co-located with the Secretary of Defense precisely so that they are not putting highly classified operational plans on commercial messaging apps. It's illegal.
Imagine this, what the congressman is saying here. And this is something that this is the first I've heard of this and didn't know it. So they have a secure system, a secure network that they can use. And instead they're using this unsecure network. And like Tim Miller is saying here, this just shows how unserious they are and how unqualified they are. There's no way that the Republicans, most of the Republicans in Congress, if you could talk to them off the record, would say that Pete Hegseth was the most qualified person that they could have gotten for Secretary of Defense. I can't imagine, some of these dumber ones like Tommy Tuberville and Lauren Boebert, yeah, they probably think he's fine. But Mitch McConnell doesn't. There's no way that Mitch McConnell's like, yeah, he's the best guy that they could have gotten. So like Tim Miller is saying, it's obvious that, and this was the same thing with the first Trump administration. He surrounded himself with a bunch of buffoons. Now, there were the people like Rex Tillerson, and I keep saying there are no Rex Tillersons in this organization. I'm not saying Rex Tillerson was a good guy, but he was competent compared to these people that we have in Trump 2.0. And he didn't last the entire first term. There isn't anybody, I guess you have Marco Rubio. He would be the more qualified person. And I would be surprised if Marco Rubio is around for the entire 4 years.
Full stop. And Pete Hegseth needs to own that accountability, because if this happened to a corporal or a captain or a general, their career would be over. He shouldn't have this job in the first place, and my goodness, he certainly shouldn't have it now.
Dave, if it turns out that is correct, and I don't dispute what the congressman just said, then should Pete Hegseth consider his position? It's a legitimate question, which Republicans would be asking of a Democrat.
I don't know. I can only hear the information that you're hearing on the fly the same exact way. If it turns out that they were told you are not allowed to put classified information in a Signal chat, and they went ahead and did it, even though it was preloaded on their computer, and Ratcliffe testified that he was briefed by people at the CIA about using that stuff, well, then there's a secondary problem. And also, it should be reiterated, I don't think anyone here is defending the fact that Mike Waltz apparently let this guy into the chat. So there is some intellectual consistency here. And it's up to Trump. Trump has to decide what he wants to do right now. Does he think this is a big enough scandal and it's worth firing a guy that he just brought into NSA or not?
It's not up to Trump. See, this is the problem with the way Republicans. This is the problem with the way Republicans are acting these days, is they act like a board of advisors.
Democrats just had 4 years of a president with dementia and a completely unqualified cabinet and virtually everyone that had anything to do with it. So tell me more about the Republicans.
The Republicans act like a board of advisors to a CEO as opposed to a separate and co-equal branch of government. They have abdicated their responsibility. Mike Johnson acts like a courtier. John Thune acts like a courtier. They're the ones who confirmed this junior varsity squad of people who are getting out-competed by the Kremlin and out-negotiated, who are being laughed at by the Chinese Communist Party right now as they prepare to blockade Taiwan. This is threatening the safety of the American people. These people are not fit for the office that they hold, and all Republicans in Congress can do is shrug their shoulders. Did Joe Biden have dementia?
Did Joe Biden have dementia, and we had 4 years of him? Do you think Joe Biden was mentally competent to be president for 4 years? Do you think Joe Biden knew things that he was signing for 4 years?
It's amazing, the whataboutisms. Why do you bring up Hillary Clinton, too? Do we want to talk about Barack Obama's tan suit as well? You would do anything to not have to talk about the fact that the Secretary of Defense just shared classified war plans.
To be fair,
was Joe Biden mentally capable of being president?
I like that Dave Rubin is doing whataboutism, and he's saying, this isn't whataboutism. Me saying, what about Joe Biden? That's not whataboutism.
Let's all accept Joe Biden was mentally unfit for office. Let's accept that. as we've been talking,
one of us isn't.
there is a
accepting that, but
report
okay.
now that Pete Hegseth and other Trump administration officials are being sued by a government watchdog group for using Signal to discuss the military plans to strike Houthi targets in Yemen. American Oversight alleges in its lawsuit the chat on the unclassified commercial app that mistakenly included the Atlantic's editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, violated federal records law. So that does appear to be something that is now an active lawsuit. Tim Miller, just to bring you back in on this, what do you think should happen? I mean, in terms of accountability, at the moment, there's a sort of Trumpian playbook of them all doubling down, launching a lot of whataboutery attacks back, but nobody wanting to actually say, it's a fair cop, Gov, and I better stand on my sword.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that there should be an actual investigation into this. I don't really have any hope that the Pam Bondi or DOJ or Kash Patel FBI will take this seriously, but I think there should be. And I also think that, sure, Mike Waltz should be accountable for this. And Mike Waltz was on Fox last night. This is crazy, Piers. Mike Waltz was on Fox last night suggesting to Laura Ingraham that Jeffrey Goldberg might have gotten on this Signal chat deliberately. That's what he said. He said it might have been deliberate. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. That's our national security advisor. Like, that's a very serious accusation. He's saying that a magazine editor might have committed illegal espionage. He just doesn't want to actually take the accountability. Because to find out whether or not that was true, you'd need to have a real investigation by DOJ or by a special counsel, and they don't want that because he knows it's him. So he just wants to throw out those lies willy-nilly. And it's kind of an absurd lie, really, actually, if some boomer magazine editor was able to sneak onto the chat illegally. That I think speaks even more to how incompetent the administration would be, other than the true story.
Yeah, I found it slightly more disconcerting that his second explanation, because he had quite a few on the Laura Ingraham interview, was that somehow Jeffrey Goldberg's number had been under somebody else's name in his contacts list. And just to remind the viewers watching this guy is the National Security Advisor for the United States of America. The idea that he doesn't know whether everyone's name in his contacts list is attached to the right number and can therefore be communicating with God knows who without any actual knowledge that they are who he thinks they are is frankly terrifying.
And this is a rare instance on Piers Morgan Uncensored where I have to agree with Piers Morgan. I mean, usually he's towing the line for the right wing and for Trump, but here he's being pretty critical of them, and he's absolutely right. He keeps talking about the whataboutery, which I like that term, I think, even better than whataboutism. But like Tim Miller says, we're not going to get any real investigation about this. He talked about Pam Bondi. She was on TV talking about Hillary Clinton. What about Hillary Clinton's servers? Hillary Clinton hasn't been in office since 2013. You know, this has been the MAGA and Republican playbook for a long time now. Whataboutism. Everything is whataboutism. And, you know, both parties do this to a degree. But I wish just once they would just come out and instead of doubling down and saying, what about Hillary? What about Joe Biden? Just say, hey, we screwed up. This is a mistake. This will not happen again. And if it does happen again, the people who are responsible for this, heads are going to roll. We're going to fire people. That's the way this should be handled. Everything, again, with the Republicans, and it's just ramped up 1,000 times under Donald Trump, under his quote-unquote leadership. It's always blame someone else. It's whataboutism. Somebody else did something that was worse, instead of, hey, that's not what this is about, what happened in some previous administration or happened 15 or 20 years ago. This is what happened right now, and you are in charge. That's how it should be, but we know that's not going to happen. Let me know what you think about what Tim Miller had to say here, what the congressman had to say, what Dave Rubin had to say, and even Piers Morgan. We didn't get around to Brandon Stracka, but if you want to hear his comments, this is about an hour-long video that you could see on Piers Morgan's Uncensored show. I like to share these clips because a lot of people say that it saves them from going and watching Piers Morgan's show themselves. So I appreciate that you come here and watch these clips. Let me know what you think in the comments. This is Chris on Culture, and I will see you in the next video.